Yo, so we're back at it again. Welcome to another edition of my unbiased viewpoint. Now, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I possibly can. It might not work, but I'm trying. I'm giving it a shot. Welcome, everybody. I am Marcus, the CEO and progenitor of my unbiased viewpoint. And here I'm just going to break down things as I see it in the political realm and in the United States as where things are, where they're going, and what we're looking at. And right now, we're faced with this so called big, beautiful bill. And I just want to take a few moments to kind of like just go over what that means to us as citizens in the United States. And we're going to tackle the potential centerpiece of the 2025 Trump agenda. It has been informally dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill. Specifics aren't really finalized, and we have to understand that this major legislative package is expected to draw heavily from the conservative Project 2025 blueprint. It aims for sweeping changes, significant tax cuts. There's going to be deep reductions in federal regulations. It calls for a major overhaul of the federal workforce. It calls for restrictive immigration reforms. And it also brings about a pivot on energy policy. Now, I need everybody to understand that proponents of the Big Beautiful Bill frame it as a streamlining government and empowering the economy type of bill. Critics, which I am one of them, I want to warn that it represents a dramatic expansion of executive power, meaning that the power lies within the hands of one person. And what does that do? That threatens civil service independence, it risks social safety nets, and it could roll back environmental and social progress. So I'm going to break that down. I'm going to break down what we know about the Big Beautiful Bill, the controversies, and what it might mean. So let's deal with some key facts. Let's deal with context and let's deal with controversies. All right. Project 2025 is the foundation of this bill. The core concepts in the Big Beautiful Bill stem from Project 2025. As you all know, I'm doing a breakdown on Project 2025, all 922 pages of it, because in this bill, Project 2025, they have taken core concepts out of the Project 2025, placed it into this bill. And what it does is it is a transition plan that was developed by the Heritage Foundation, over 100 conservative organizations. They branded it the Big Beautiful Bill, and it's a nickname that comes from Trump's 2017 tax cut branding. He called it the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts. It signals an ambitious transformative agenda that's focused solely on conservative priorities. It is not bipartisan, it is only conservatism. Now, what are the goals? You have to understand what the core goals of. What they are aiming at are major tax cuts to extend and expand the 2017 individual tax cuts that were set to expire 2025. What could happen potentially is it could lower corporate rates even more. There's going to be, under this bill, massive deregulation. They're going to aggressively roll back regulations, particularly environmental. Client, climate is one of those things. Financial, labor, and health care. Healthcare, ladies and gentlemen. Healthcare. They're going to roll back healthcare. Now, the federal workforce is going to see an overhaul. They're implementing Schedule F, which is something that I've told you all about before. And what that is going to do is it reclassifies tens of thousands of federal workers as political appointees, making them easier to fire, right? Easier to fire. They're doing the immigration crackdown. It doesn't matter if you are an undocumented immigrant or not. They are picking you up off the streets. They are picking you up at any location. Anybody can call ICE on you, and the Gestapo ICE can come and pick you up from wherever you are. They're picking children up from school. They're picking people up at Home Depot. They are picking people up from their homes. They are restricting asylum. They are expanded detention, deportations. They're ending birthright citizenship via an executive order. That's what they're doing via an executive order. And they're testing the courts. What they're doing is they're doing this thing so much and so rapidly that they are filling up the courts. They are bombarding the courts, pipelining the courts with all these things, right? And so what does that do? They put the courts in a place where the courts are like inundated with all types of cases, and all they have to do is try to, push through orders to even, they have to go through these cases. They have to look at these cases. They have to read what this stuff is about. And then in the interim, also under the immigration crackdown, they are supposedly resuming the border wall construction and saying that Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Mexico is not going to pay for the wall. Taxpayers are going to pay for the wall. And it's not going to be the high end tax people, it's going to be the ones on the lower end of this bill. Those who make less than, I believe, it's $500,000, which would be me, because I make less than $500,000 a year. So the cost to pay for this bill comes out of our taxes. The cost to pay for the wall comes out of our taxes. There's also something in the bill about energy dominance. And what that is doing is it is unleashing fossil fuel production, oil, gas, and coal. And it's dismantling climate initiatives and subsidies for renewables, electric vehicles. See you later, Elon Musk. Because this, as Trump said, which I stated from the beginning, and so many others, is that was really never a friendship. It just seemed very, very ingenuous because Trump hates electric vehicles. He hates the fact that this electric bill is out front, and people were buying electric cars, and people are using electric. They're spending their money on electric cars and subsidies that go to renewables and EVs and solar panels and wind turbines. He says that those things cause brain cancer and all kinds of stuff like that. That sounds conspiratorial to me, but I'm not him. Social policy shifts. They're going to restrict abortion access. They're eliminating LGBTQ protections, promoting traditional values in education and policy. Now, can you believe that on a post that I posted, I'm going to talk about this also. It was after they had the unsuccessful bombing of Iran. I have someone post under a post that I made, and she is a full-fledged lesbian. She is living with her lover. She is a native of Cuba whose family came here on the Mario boat lift. And in that community, those people are called the Mariolitos. That means that they came over under the boat lift, or through the port of Mario, in order to get to Miami. And those of us who were little kids at that time that were living in Florida in the 1980s, during that whole entire transition of a lot of Cubans coming into the United States via Florida, there was big news on the news. The news were all reporting that these people were criminals. It was a big mess down in Miami for quite some time, a big mess. And so those people did not come over legally, but they came over supposedly seeking asylum But according to Fidel Castro, these are the people who were the undesirables of society. And he was sending them to the United States. And those people have since integrated into somewhat American life. I would say they still hold on, a lot of them, to the traditional Cuban values. They hold on to their language, they hold on to their culture. If it were not so, then why would they call a location in Miami Little Havana? Why? Because that's what they did. They set up another Havana in Cuba, in another Havana outside of Cuba, but in Miami, Florida. Okay, so they're rolling back as she gets on my live, and she's a full-fledged lesbian. She lives with her wife. She speaks a Spanish language. She speaks the Cuban language, a Cuban Spanish language. What and the dialect is Cuban. So it's Spanish, but the dialect is a Cuban dialect. And then it could also be regional, depending on what part of Cuba you come from or where you live. But the colloquialisms and stuff are Cuban. That's how she speaks. But she voted for Trump. And she was arguing with me about a post that I made. And I says to her, how is it that well, you know what? I'm going to save that for a post because I'm going to post about the reaction that I got just because I posted that post. All right. Now let's talk about the executive power focus. Most of this agenda is relying heavily on executive orders, and we always see that they're always dropping executive orders and agency actions, and those things are going to be enabled by the workforce overhaul. Potentially, what those things are aimed at doing is bypassing Congress on key issues. So they will put something out, whether it's harmful to the United States, the citizens of the United States or not. They're going to push forth certain types of agendas and executive orders and agency actions and bypass Congress totally on key issues. That's what this bill does. Major controversies in this bill definitely are Schedule F and civil service. Critics, I am one. I see this as politicizing. This is nonpartisan civil service. This is enabling patronage and purging expertise. We don't want experts in these areas. We want loyalists in these areas who will do what I say, regardless of the outcome. The scope and the speed of this, the sheer scale, ladies and gentlemen, and the spread of proposed changes has to raise concerns. It has to raise concerns about disruption, unintended consequences, and a lack of oversight. All of these things are stuff that we are going to see in this bill as it goes forward. We don't know what's going to happen at this time. We would hope that a lot of these that this bill would be challenged. We thought it was going to be challenged, but um, with the way that things are going and how we see it, we have to understand that this agenda, Project 2025 is moving forward kind of fast here. We are definitely going to see some social and environmental rollbacks. As I said, there's deep opposition. It exists, especially as it relates to reversing the climate actions. But then there's also pushback on the LGBTQ plus rights. There's pushback on abortion access, and there's pushback on the environmental protections. We're going to see a cost and deficit impact. There's going to be large tax cuts without offsetting spending cuts. And that's going to significantly increase the national debt by $5 trillion. And that's something that anybody who is concerned about what is happening in the United States under this administration, it should very much, very, very, very much alarm you. And the rate that they're doing it without basically, they get the consent of a certain amount of people, even though Elon Musk paid for a lot of those votes. Um, we see the FAFO effect happening right now, and it's like there is no slowing down. There are stumbling blocks and there are roadblocks, but remember, he did get free pro bono law um, lawyers and attorneys, so attorneys at law, rather, I should say. But let's see as this thing moves forward. I definitely see it as partisan in nature. This bill is not bipartisan at all. It's expected that it would face unified Democratic opposition, and it is a little bit of Republican opposition. Um, it did not struggle in a closely divided Senate because they knew that they needed to have a certain amount of people, and if there was a tie, who was going to be the tiebreaker? Of course, that would be Vice President J.D. Vance, and he definitely did that to get it to the next place. Now, what happens after that is we have to understand some of the sections and the provisions that are in this bill that are 100% based on the Project 2025 mandate. Since no bill text exists, uh, we have to summarize the keys in Project 2025. There are pillars in Project 2025 that are likely going to inform legislation and executive action. So, number one, we're looking at the mandate for leadership. That is the overall plan. And that's the Project 2025. So, this is the comprehensive packet, all 922 pages. The comprehensive Project 2025, it's the playbook. It details policy proposals, personnel plans on every major agency. And the goal is to provide a roadmap for conservative transformation of the federal government. Conservative transformation of the federal government. Here in at that part comes Schedule F and the implementation of Schedule F. This is going to reclassify things. This Schedule F aims at reclassifying policy related federal roles as at will positions. So the goal of it is to increase presidential control over agencies, and they want to be able to remove people who they perceive to be bureaucratic obstacles. Next in this bill and in the Project 2025 agenda is also the tax and economy chapter. We're going to go through each of these. As you keep following me, you'll continue to see. So, what happens with this is it advocates for permanent tax cuts. It advocates for deregulation. It advocates for challenging the woke corporations, those who have DEI institutions. So, as a goal, what they want to do with that is stimulate supposedly economic growth through conservative supply side principles. Ladies and gentlemen, you need a global supply chain. You need global economy to work in order for us to remain a global power. We cannot become isolationist. We can't. You cannot be global if you are in isolation. Now, the next thing we're looking at is the deregulation agenda. All of this, again, is a part of the Project 2025 agenda, as well as what's going on in this bill. The deregulation part, it outlines specific regulations to target, and they're doing it for rapid repeal across energy, environment, finance, and healthcare. Healthcare is going to take a huge hit. You already have someone at the helm of the the Department of Health, the Kennedy guy, who is completely a a so-called recovering heroin addict and God knows what else. But this person is at the helm of telling us how we're going to care for our health, our children, our grandchildren, ourselves. Right. Their goal in this is to reduce government burden on businesses. That's the so-called goal. All right. And remember, I said it was going to be unbiased. I am only stating the facts, and I'm only giving my unbiased opinion. I said I would be unbiased about this, but I'm telling you all what they are saying their goals are, but what they are doing. Okay, and what they're saying and what they are doing, how it pans out, we are already seeing certain things, and we don't know. All we can do is either fight back or roll over and play dead. All right, so immigration and border security. That's another hot thing that is in this bill. What that immigration and border security portion of the bill proposes are restrictive policies. They want to have increased enforcement. They're ending catch and release, and they're challenging birthright citizenship. The goal is to reduce illegal immigration and assert stricter control. That's the goal of that. There's another agenda in there, energy and environment. Again, this is all a part of Project 2025. That focuses on maximizing fossil fuel production, right? Withdrawing from the climate agreement, dismantling the EPA regulations. And what do they want to do? They want to achieve energy dominance and reduce energy costs. You have to understand that the majority of the world is moving away from that type of power. They are moving away from coal. They're moving away from fossil fuel production. They're moving more towards solar energy, renewable energy, saving energy. They're looking at reducing the amount of emissions that are going into the atmosphere. The majority of the world is moving into that direction. Under this administration, their aim is to continue, and not only to continue, but to increase and maximize fossil fuel production. You, they believe that that makes them a power, and in a lot of places it does, because power is still fuel and fossils are still reigning in a lot of areas, but the world is shifting. Life and family policy. They want to restrict abortion. They want to eliminate federal support for abortion providers. They want to promote traditional family structures, and they want to roll back LGBTQ plus protections. The goal is advance social conservative values. Now, I am not. I'm not against promoting traditional family structures. I grew up traditional. I grew up in a traditional conservative family. And someone could say, "Well, how are you conservative? How did you grow up in a conservative traditional household, and you are a liberal?" Well, the thing is, regarding my position and my standpoint, I may have grown up in a home where the family structure is traditional. The family structure is a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and their children. And I still believe in that 100%. What I don't believe in is trying to force someone to live the way that I live, trying to force someone to believe the way that I believe, and making it a law to make me be the way that you are, or to make you be the way that I am. That's something that I am totally against. The Bible says that the Lord made us in his image and in his likeness. And what makes us most like him is he gave us the ability to choose. He did not give us instincts. So a person's choice is their choice, but the consequences that come with their choices are just that. There's only one thing that happens in as it relates to that. If you're speaking scripturally, the Bible says that the wages of sin is death, right? The wages of sin is death. So the sin has no real category, is sin. So if the wages of sin is death, then it doesn't matter what the sin is. If it's continued sin, then the wage that you're going to get for whatever it is that you've done is death. So it's not about homosexuality. It's not about marital adulterous situations. It's not about thievery. It's not about murder. It's about sin, period. Sin. The wages of sin is death. So I feel like, well, I understand and believe that people make choices based on what they want to do, um, not what I'm telling someone to do. I raise my son. If he does what he wants to do as an adult, the consequences of his actions are on him, not on me, because in my household growing up, he was raised in a way that he knew right from wrong. He knew if he had to go left, you go left. If you go right, you go right. But he also understands that the wages of sin is death. His choices are his choices. My choices are my choices. So when it comes to life and family, you people have things that are going to come up regarding their health, especially women. and men too. We do, but women have certain things that um, intricately that are different from us, and we know that. We already know that. Now, I want to close out with just some things to have people think about. Just some follow up questions for discussion in your private time. If you want to comment under the live, you most certainly can. But given the ambitious scope of Project 2025 and the potentiality of the big, beautiful bill, how much of this agenda realistically requires new legislation versus being achievable through executive orders and agency actions, especially with Schedule F implemented? That is something that the nation needs to think about because certainly the Republican Party has not. Workforce and governance. Here's another one. The Schedule F proposal is very controversial, is hugely controversial. The supporters of the Project 25 and Schedule F, they say it's needed for accountability, right? But critics, and I'm one of them, call it a recipe for chaos and politicization. Politicization. It is highly politicized, right? But it's politicized only in one way. It's politicized in the favor of the far right. So, what are, as we as citizens here in the United States, who are going to have to be the ones living under this bill, what are the greatest practical risks of such a sweeping overhaul of the federal civil service? We have plenty of family members who are civil service, who are employed civilly under the civil service, are employed. What is going to be the greatest practical risk of such a sweeping overhaul? Those are things that we have to think about. I want to leave you with a couple more questions. When you're thinking about the economic trade-offs that are going to be implemented, I want you to understand that while tax cuts and deregulation are central goals, Project 2025 also emphasizes deficit reduction. How would a potential administration reconcile significant tax cuts with the goal of controlling the national debt? Now, remember, it's going to add $5 trillion to the national debt, especially if major spending cuts face political hurdles. It should face political hurdles. This is going to be a mess as it is being rolled out. And I think that for the most part, they know it. However, they don't care. All right. The social policy and public opinion. So let me kind of like paint a picture here. Project 2025 advocates for significant restrictions on abortion access, on LGBTQ plus rights, on policies that are popular with their base. Oftentimes, though, those things face broader public opposition, right? We've seen No More Kings protests. We've seen protests against the deportation of immigrants because a lot of the people are saying that they are citizens and they're being picked up and they're being detained and some are being deported. How might pursuing the aspects of the agenda, Project 2025, and this bill, how is that going to impact the political viability of the broader economic and governmental reforms? Now, I hope these questions aren't too deep for my audience, but maybe someone, it might ring a bell or ring true with someone. And the last thing that I want to just throw out here, and I'm getting ready to go, is Trump's role versus Project 2025. I need you to understand that Project 2025 provides a detailed blueprint for what they want to do. But you also need to understand that Trump has his own priorities and his own style. And as this thing is laid out, you have to see that there is either a strong alignment between Trump's goals and Project 2025, or you don't see a strong alignment. There might be potential tension. There might be divergence in how the big, beautiful bill might ultimately take shape because Trump has his own agenda, his own priorities, his own style. Some of the things in Project 2025 may benefit him, and some of the things in Project 2025 may not. So let's see how that rolls out and what the wall looks like once the paint is thrown against it. And that's my opinion on the big, beautiful bill. That's my unbiased viewpoint. And ladies and gentlemen, just for clarity, these are prescription glasses because my eyesight is going bad. So I needed to be able to see, and that is why I have glasses on. It's not for fashion. Trust me. I like the way they look, but if it were up to me, I would not have these glasses on at all. But anyway, listen, take a few moments, listen to the podcast, comment, speak your point, whatever you want to say, do it. And let's talk about it in the future. Leave some comments and let's have the conversation.